Whispers in Redemption. Redemption wasn't a place you stumbled upon, it was a place you ended up. Like a stray dog no one wanted, it had been kicked around by misfortune, chewed on by hardship, and finally spat out in the dust of the Arizona territory. The sun beat down on cracked adobe walls, bleached the color from wooden signs hanging askew, and baked the very hope out of the ground. Buildings stood like hollow-eyed skeletons, monuments to dreams that had withered and died. The wind, a constant, mournful presence, whistled through broken window panes and carried whispers of broken promises. Lily Bellwether, however, refused to listen to those whispers. Inside, Lily's sweet surrender. The aroma of vanilla and cinnamon fought a valiant, if losing, battle against the pervasive smell of dust. Flour dusted Lily's apron and clung to stray strands of her auburn hair as she carefully piped frosting onto a row of cupcakes. The bell above the door jingled, announcing a customer, but Lily barely glanced up. "Be with you in a tick, Mr. Abernathy," she called out, her voice bright against the backdrop of the desolate town. The bell jingled again, then a third time in rapid succession, which was unusual. Lily straightened, wiping her hands on her apron, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. Maybe, just maybe, word had spread about her new salted caramel cookies. But it wasn't a rush of customers that greeted her. It was a single figure standing just inside the doorway. The silhouette was cast long and dark by the harsh sunlight, but after a moment Lily recognized the man. "Mayor Thompson," she said, a polite smile gracing her lips. "What can I do for you today?" Thaddeus Thompson, a man whose belly strained against the buttons of his waistcoat and whose face was a roadmap of self-importance, puffed out his chest. "Miss Bellwether," he boomed, his voice echoing in the small bakery. "I've come to discuss your correspondence." Lily's smile faltered. "My correspondence, sir?" "Yes, these letters you've been sending." "To Mr. Silas Blackwood, was it?" A blush crept up Lily's neck. She knew the townsfolk talked. She couldn't very well miss the sideways glances and hushed whispers that followed her. But to have the mayor himself address it so directly. "I don't see how my personal affairs are any concern of yours, Mayor," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Thompson chuckled, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Everything that affects this town is my concern, Miss Bellwether. And your fantasies are beginning to affect Redemption." He gestured to the stack of letters tied with ribbon on a nearby shelf. "These missives to a man who hasn't set foot in this territory in years, a man rumored to be well, let's just say his reputation precedes him. They're giving people the wrong idea about Redemption." "Silas is a good man," Lily insisted, her chin lifting defiantly. "Or at least he was being the operative word, wouldn't you say?" "The man's a ghost, Miss Bellwether." "A story. You're pinning your hopes on a shadow." "I'm pinning my hopes on a promise," Lily countered, her voice barely a whisper. Thompson's face hardened. "This town needs practical solutions, Miss Bellwether, not fairy tales. We need to attract settlers, investors. Your romantic delusions, they make us look foolish. Like we're all waiting for some gunslinger to ride in and save us." "And what, pray tell, are you doing to save us, Mayor?" Lily challenged, her eyes flashing. Thompson's smile returned, slow and predatory. "I have plans, Miss Bellwether. Grand plans. But they require a certain image. An image of stability, of progress. Not a lovesick baker writing letters to a legend." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Do you understand?" Lily stared back, her heart pounding. She understood perfectly. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, a group of women gathered outside Mrs. Gable's general store. Their voices, usually hushed and careful, were louder than usual, punctuated by snickers and knowing glances. "Did you hear what the mayor said to her?" Mrs. Gable whispered, her eyes darting around to make sure no one was eavesdropping. "Right in the bakery, bold as brass. Said her letters were making the town look ridiculous." "Well, they are, aren't they?" Martha Higgins chimed in, adjusting her bonnet. "Imagine writing love letters to Silas Blackwood. A man who probably doesn't even remember her name." "She's been doing it for years," Agnes Plummer added, shaking her head. "Every week without fail. Rain or shine, that letter goes out. Like clockwork." "Foolish girl," Mrs. Gable clucked, her plump cheeks quivering. "Wasting her time and her postage on a pipe dream." "I heard he used to buy her lollipops when she was a child," Martha said, her voice dripping with scorn. "Probably thinks that makes them sweethearts." A ripple of laughter went through the group. "And all those fancy words she uses," Agnes said, rolling her eyes. "I saw one once when it blew out of the postman's bag. Talking about sunsets and souls and nonsense. What does a gunslinger care about sunsets?" She reads too many novels, Mrs. Gable declared, adjusting the spectacles perched on her nose. Fills her head with foolish notions. She should be focusing on finding a husband, someone respectable, Martha said, her gaze sweeping over the dilapidated buildings of Redemption. Not chasing after a ghost. The women continued to gossip, their voices rising and falling with the setting sun. Lily's dreams, her hopes, her carefully crafted words were dissected and dismissed, ridiculed and scorned. They were just whispers in Redemption, carried on the wind, lost in the dust. Back in the bakery, Lily dipped her quill into the inkwell. Despite the mayor's visit, despite the townsfolk's mockery, she began to write. The words flowed from her pen, a defiant act of hope in the face of despair. She would not let their bitterness extinguish her light. Not yet, my dearest Silas, she wrote. The desert blooms tonight with the promise of rain, the bonfire of dreams. Mayor Thompson's voice, amplified by the makeshift stage facing the ancient oak in the town square, cut through the afternoon air. Friends, neighbors, citizens of Redemption, he bellowed, his words honed by years of persuasive oration. He brandished Lily's letters, the delicate pages catching the sunlight like trapped sparks. These are a blight, a putrid infection festering at the heart of our town's good name. Lily stood at the edge of the throng, flour dusting her apron, her spirit crushed by a weight heavier than stone. The acrid tang of wood smoke laced the air, a pyre erected earlier casting long shadows. She caught sight of Deputy Johnson near the mayor, his normally cheerful countenance etched with worry. He avoided her gaze. For too long, Thompson's voice rose, tinged with fervor. We have indulged this fantasy. This unhealthy fixation on a phantom. Silas Blackwood is gone. A tale, perhaps, but one best consigned to oblivion. These missives, brimming with fanciful notions and romantic whimsy, only dredge up the darkness that once plagued Redemption. A ripple of unease spread through the crowd. Some heads bobbed in somber agreement while others fidgeted, their eyes flickering toward Lily. She noticed Mrs. Abernathy, her Tuesday bread customer, now clutching her shawl, lips pursed in disapproval. These letters, Thompson lowered his voice to a grave murmur, are an affront to those who suffered under Blackwood's tyranny. They glorify a monster. They sentimentalize brutality. Shall we permit such venom to poison the minds of our children? He punctuated his question by hurling the letters onto the waiting flames. Instantly they were devoured, the fragile paper contorting and charring. A silent cry escaped Lily's lips, trapped in her chest. We must purge this obsession. Thompson's arm swept theatrically towards the roaring blaze. We must demonstrate to the world that Redemption has broken free, that we will not be shackled by specters of the past. He nodded to Deputy Johnson, who stepped forward with visible reluctance, carrying a hefty burlap sack. The sack shifted, a telltale sign of its contents. Letters. Her letters. Every carefully chosen word she had poured onto those pages. An expression of her unwavering faith. Anguish lined Johnson's face. He met Lily's eyes, a silent plea for understanding. Lily had nothing to give. She was drowning in despair. One by one, he surrendered the letters to the ravenous fire. Crimson tendrils danced skyward in a gruesome spectacle. The air filled with the bitter reek of incineration, a stench that would forever haunt Lily's senses. Lily watched, paralyzed, as her dreams dissolved into smoke. Each leaping flame was a knife twisting in her core. Each snapping spark was a spiteful whisper, mocking her naive hope. Spurred by the mayor's pronouncements and the dramatic spectacle, the crowd began to chant, Redemption, redemption, redemption. The word reverberated, a crushing wave obliterating the silent screams within Lily. Tears streaked her face, mixing with the airborne soot. She felt utterly isolated, abandoned by the very people she had nourished with her baking, tended in their illness, and comforted in their sorrow. As the last vestiges of her correspondence were consumed, Lily recoiled, stumbling backward from the heat, the chorus, the remnants of her shattered aspirations. She spun and bolted, running aimlessly through Redemption's streets, her footsteps echoing in the sudden hush. Far above, a solitary hawk spiraled, its sharp gaze surveying the scene. It watched the bonfire blaze, saw the townsfolk celebrate, and observed Lily's heartbroken retreat. The hawk's piercing cry echoed, a mournful lament for a community that had traded conviction for trepidation, unanimity for empathy, and ashes for aspiration. The hawk, an old sentinel, wheeled once more above Redemption, then angled towards the faraway peaks, carrying its silent awareness with it. A shift in the wind. The wind, normally a sibilant murmur through the pines around Silas's cabin, now mauled the walls like a maddened beast. Window panes shivered in their frames, and the chimney exhaled a mournful dirge that set his teeth on edge. Hunched at his table, he obsessively polished his revolver. The cylinder's measured clicks, typically a bomb in the wilderness's hush, offered no solace tonight. The sound echoed the disquiet festering inside him, a feeling dormant since his flight from Redemption. A familiar coil of guilt, his constant companion, constricted. He pledged to return, a vow unspoken but clear in the lingering glance he'd shared with Lily, a silent promise of protection even from exile. Silas stilled, rag pressed to the gun's cool steel, and banished the thought. Redemption belonged to a bygone era. Lily was undoubtedly married, settled, his memory a faded tintype in her past. He hoped she'd found joy. Truly. Outside, the wind escalated to a banshee's wail, punctuated by a branch's sharp fracture in the darkness. Sighing, Silas set down the revolver. He couldn't shake the premonition that something was terribly amiss. He rose, the floorboards underfoot offering a sonorous protest to his weight, and went to the hearth. He coaxed the embers, feeding them fresh logs, watching hungrily as flames embraced the wood, casting grotesque shadows on the log walls. He needed clarity, a ride might offer it. Grabbing his coat, the worn hide a familiar comfort, he eschewed a hat, letting the tempest buffet his hair. Stepping out into the frigid air, the cold was a jolt, briefly clearing the mental mire. He saddled Ghost, his sturdy Appaloosa, and surrendered to the night. The moon hid behind shrouds of cloud, with only faint starlight piercing the gloom. He trusted Ghost's instincts, allowing him to navigate the rugged terrain. They rode for what seemed like an eternity, the wind an unrelenting presence, tugging at his coat, muttering secrets beyond his grasp. As the first pale streaks of dawn kissed the eastern sky, Ghost faltered, ears pricked. Silas reined him in, senses heightened. A tumbleweed, snagged on a skeletal Joshua tree, pirouetted wildly. Nothing more than a common sight in this desolate land. Yet something about it snagged his attention. Dismounting, he approached with caution. He saw it as he drew closer, entwined within the spiny embrace of the tumbleweed, clinging tenaciously to the brittle stems, a small, singed scrap of paper. He freed it carefully, his fingers grazing its crumbling edges. Blackened and fragile, it was scarcely larger than his thumb. Fire had devoured most of the script. However, in a sheltered corner, protected by a fold, a few letters remained. He squinted, his pulse quickening. The penmanship was unmistakable, delicate loops and elegant curves etched in faded ink. He recognized that hand. He knew it more intimately than his own. Wood, the fragment offered. Beneath it, a solitary, unmistakable initial, L, Lily. An icy dread surged through him, eclipsing the wind's chill. He knew with sickening certainty that this scrap was from her letters. The letters she had penned to him. How could this be? Why was such a letter borne by the wind across the vast distance from Redemption? The gnawing unease of the evening coalesced into a bone-deep conviction that disaster had struck. He clutched the charred fragment, the single L, a desperate signal in the encroaching light. He had promised her safety. And now, across the immensity of the desert, he heard her silent summons. A wordless entreaty riding the wind. Mounting Ghost, his face hardened. The sun now ascended, tinting the sky with vermilion and rose. He steered his horse eastward toward Redemption. The knot in his stomach tightened, a cold fist clenching ever harder. He had a promise to fulfill. Riding towards Redemption. Ash coated Silas's palate. He expelled the taste, the lingering grit, a constant echo of the inferno that had consumed his former life. He tightened Jericho's saddle girth, the big dun gelding shuffling with barely contained energy. Jericho, though no warhorse, possessed sturdiness, reliability, and unswerving loyalty, attributes Silas valued above all others. After a final tug on the cinch, he stroked Jericho's neck. Easy, boy. Heading homeward. That single word felt alien, like a corroded key grinding against a long-sealed lock. Redemption had been a closed book for 5 years, ever since the council had exiled him for a transgression he hadn't committed, a transgression that had shattered Lily's faith in him. He sifted through his meager possessions, a tightly rolled bedroll, a battered canteen, a small store of jerky, and his father's aged, leather-bound journal. He paused, then slid the journal into his saddlebag. He refrained from opening it for years, the faded script a painful reminder of a life extinguished. Yet, instinct whispered that he might crave its wisdom, or at least its solace, before his journey culminated. His Winchester lever-action rifle sat secure in its scabbard. The grip, polished smooth by years of handling, bore countless minute scars, each a silent chronicle. He tested the action. The metallic snick resonated in the quiet of the forsaken prospector's shack, his haven for months. He replenished the magazine, cartridges clicking firmly into place. He was a wraith now, but a wraith armed and dangerous. He mounted Jericho, the saddle leather groaning beneath his weight. The setting sun, a molten disk, bled across the horizon, casting the desert in fiery shades. He spurred Jericho onward, the gelding's hooves drumming softly on the trail. A chill permeated the air as dusk deepened. Silas drew his well-worn duster tighter, the rough collar abrading his skin. Only the measured cadence of Jericho's hooves and a distant coyote's lament broke the silence. Hours melted away before he noticed them. A wavering firelight in the distance, a knot of silhouettes clustered around it. Raiders. He could almost taste their presence, a foul blend of cheap spirits and desperation carried on the breeze. Silas eased Jericho to a saunter, his hand drifting instinctively toward his rifle. He sought no confrontation, but neither would he evade it. Not anymore. As he approached, four figures detached themselves from the shadows, hard-bitten men with faces etched with violence and cruel gazes. One of them advanced, obstructing the path. "Well now, what's this?" the rogue snarled, his voice a gravelly rasp. "A lone rider. Seems our fortunes are about to shift." Silas halted Jericho a few paces away, keeping his hands visible, his expression neutral. "Just passing through." "That's the stock phrase," another bandit chuckled, drawing nearer. He brandished a corroded bowie knife, its blade catching the firelight. "But on this road, there's a price to be paid." "I carry little money," Silas stated, his voice a low thrum. "We'll determine that," the first bandit retorted, his eyes narrowing. "Empty your pockets." Silas hesitated, then slowly drew out a few coins. He presented them on his open palm. The leader sneered. "Is that all? Do you truly think we're gullible enough to believe that's all you possess?" Silas merely shrugged. "Believe as you wish." The ringleader nodded towards one of his cronies, who stepped forward and seized Jericho's reins. "Fine, let's see what trinkets you're concealing in those saddlebags." Silas remained immobile, observing them intently. They were careless, arrogant, intoxicated. He was capable of taking them all. He simply preferred not to. As the bandit rifled through the saddlebags, Silas saw an opening. He faked a cough, then spat on the ground. The bandit chieftain recoiled slightly, his attention momentarily diverted. In that sliver of time, Silas reacted. He released the reins, seized the leader's wrist, and twisted with brutal speed. A distinct crack shattered the quiet as the bandit's weapon clattered to the ground. Silas kicked the gun aside, then spun and disarmed the knife man, sending his blade spiraling into the abyss. The two remaining bandits faltered, taken aback by the sudden onslaught. They were clearly outmatched. "I desire no bloodshed," Silas said, his voice like honed steel. "Simply allow me passage." The chieftain, cradling his injured wrist, glared at Silas with undisguised animosity. "You'll rue this," he spat. Silas merely returned his gaze, his eyes glacial. "Perhaps, but not tonight." He reclaimed Jericho's reins, swung back into the saddle, and goaded the horse onward, leaving the bandits spitting curses in the dust. He didn't glance back, confident they wouldn't pursue. He'd made his point emphatically. As he rode into the night, he felt a nascent emotion stir within him, one he hadn't experienced for years, a flicker of purpose. He was still a ghost, but tonight he was a ghost riding towards the faint glimmer of light. Redemption awaited. And whatever trials lay in wait, he would confront them without hesitation. For Lily's sake. Leaving redemption. The usual comforting blanket of flower dust clung to Lily like a stifling shroud. Each sweep of her broom echoed like a mournful sigh in the vast, empty bakery. Outside, redemption stirred, the sounds of commerce, rattling wagons, hawking voices, muffled as though she were already leagues away. Her room upstairs resembled a ransacked fort, littered with half-packed linens and overflowing bags. The small trunk, once envisioned for a hopeful bride's trousseau, now cradled the fragments of her broken life. A dog-eared copy of A Baker's Tour of the World, a pinch of dried lavender from her window, and the unfinished sampler depicting Silas's initials entwined with wheat. She slammed the lid, the sound, decisive and sharp, shattered the quiet. The sampler wouldn't travel with her. Carrying his memory felt like a desecration. Let it become a ghost here, in a town haunted by his absence. Lily cinched the drawstring of her heavy bag, securing her meager savings. Barely enough for a stagecoach ticket to anywhere, much less a fresh start. But it was enough, she insisted silently, fighting the constriction in her throat. Back downstairs, she paused in the doorway, the familiar aroma of yeast and sugar heavy in the air. The gleaming brass oven, ordinarily a beacon of warmth and possibility, stood cold and indifferent. She recalled countless pre-dawn hours, the quiet joy of shaping dough, the smiles sparked by warm pastries. Now, the thought of baking another crumb felt like a bitter mockery. She ran her fingers along the worn counter, tracing the grooves etched by years of leaning. The letterbox, typically overflowing with orders, remained empty. She remembered Silas's first note nestled amongst requests for sourdough and rye. The memory, bittersweet and sharp, pierced her. With a sigh, she retrieved her unsent letter. The ink had paled, the paper softened from repeated unfolding. After the incident, she couldn't bring herself to mail it. She reread the familiar words, her heart aching with a dull throb of longing. Silas, she'd written, the wind whispers your name through the rye. I fear they are trying to erase you from redemption, but you are etched into my heart. Each loaf is a prayer for your safe return. She crushed the paper, the fibers tearing under her grip. There would be no return. Not for him nor for her. A shuffle broke the silence. Old man Fitzwilliam stood in the doorway, leaning heavily on his cane, his usually bright eyes shadowed with concern. Leaving us, Lilybug? His voice, roughened by age, was thick with sadness. Lily offered a brittle smile. Just for a bit, Fitzwilliam. I need a change of air. He hobbled closer, his gaze sweeping over the packed bags and the desolate bakery. A change of air won't change what's in your soul, child. He paused, meeting her gaze. Don't let them grind you down, Lily. Don't surrender your spirit. Lily averted her eyes. It's not about winning, Fitzwilliam. It's about breathing. He reached out, his gnarled hand covering hers. His touch, surprisingly strong and warm, anchored her. Breathing ain't living, Lily. You were meant for more than just existing. You were meant to leaven the world with joy. He squeezed gently. Redemption will miss your bread, child, but it will miss your spark more. His words offered solace, yet underscored the pointlessness of staying. She couldn't confront this town, the murmurs, the condemnation, the suffocating quiet. Thank you, Fitzwilliam, she whispered, her voice trembling. For everything. She withdrew her hand, grabbed her bags, and stepped out of the bakery, abandoning the only home she'd ever known. As she walked toward the stagecoach depot, she didn't dare to look back. She simply couldn't. The weight of redemption, the weight of her lost dreams, pressed down hard enough without the burden of a final, lingering glance. The stagecoach represented her solitary hope for deliverance. Thompson's opportunity. Before the dust clouds kicked up by the departing stagecoach had even begun to settle, Mayor Thaddeus Thompson was already making his way toward the sheriff's office, the sound of his expensive leather boots a sharp counterpoint to the quiet street. Inside, Deputy Caleb Johnson was engrossed in a game of checkers against himself, meticulously considering each move. Johnson! Thompson's voice echoed in the confined space. Enough with the pastimes. There's actual work to be done. Startled, Caleb looked up, a perpetual air of bewildered youth etched on his features. Morning, Mayor. Just ensuring the peace, sir. Thompson brushed off the explanation with a wave. Peace is fine, but peace doesn't pave roads or breed prosperity. Opportunity does. And opportunity, my boy, is knocking loud. Lowering his voice to a stage whisper, he added, Lily's vanished. Caleb's brow knitted together. Vanished? Where to, sir? Vanished, period. Packed her belongings and departed redemption. Good riddance, Thompson declared, his chest swelling. She had it coming. Such insolence, it can't be indulged. Caleb shifted, unease creeping in. He'd always appreciated Lily's baked goods and he'd never quite grasped the enormity of her offense. But the bakery, Mayor? Who's going to provide the town with bread? A low chuckle rumbled in Thompson's throat. That, Johnson, is where fortune smiles. That bakery commands a prime location. Main Street gold wasted on someone who lacked the vision to appreciate it. He leaned closer, his breath a cocktail of aged whiskey and stale cigars. I have ideas, Johnson. Grand ideas. That bakery can be transformed into something more substantial. A mercantile, perhaps. Or, well, let's just say the right proprietor could turn a handsome sum. Caleb nervously touched a checker piece. But Lily's belongings? The equipment? Her, the ovens? Details, Johnson, trivial details. We'll inventory everything, naturally. Secure the place. And then, we'll assess the situation. I'll require your assistance, of course. Securing the premises, the official aspects. All in the line of duty, understand. Caleb hesitated. But shouldn't we wait? In case she returns. The mayor's amiable expression hardened into flint. Don't be so green, Johnson. She won't be back. And frankly, this town is improved by her absence. You grasp that, don't you? We must maintain order. Stability. Caleb swallowed hard. He understood Thompson's sway all too well. He'd witnessed the pressure to conform, to concur, to avert his gaze. Besides, Thompson continued, his tone softening, consider the advantages for the township. Increased revenue. More employment. Progress, Johnson. It's all about progress. He clapped Caleb on the shoulder, the force of the blow nearly throwing him off balance. Let's go secure that bakery, son. The sooner we begin, the sooner redemption moves forward. Later that evening, Thompson reclined in his office, amber liquor swirling in a cut crystal glass. The sinking sun painted the room in long strokes of fiery orange and opulent gold. A soft, self-satisfied chuckle escaped him. He envisioned the bakery emptied and cleansed, ready for its new incarnation. He imagined the wealth pouring in, filling his coffers. He pictured the simmering jealousy on the faces of his rivals. Foolish girl, he murmured, draining his glass. She practically gifted it to me. Served it up on a platter. Rising, he walked to the window, gazing out at the town cloaked in encroaching darkness. Redemption. His redemption. He controlled the bank, the land, and the businesses. Now, thanks to Lily's indiscretion, he controlled the bakery as well. He noticed Caleb walking down the street, shoulders slumped. Thompson felt a momentary flash of irritation. The lad was spineless. Too much conscience. But useful nonetheless. Easily swayed, he raised his empty glass in a silent salute. To redemption, he breathed, and to the opportunities it affords. The weary traveler. The campfire popped and hissed, scattering sparks that danced towards the inky canvas above. Silas shifted, the saddle groaning a soft complaint beneath him. Days he'd ridden, drawn westward by stale rations and a creeping unease that coiled in his gut. Lily's fragmented note, nestled in his vest, served as a constant, agonizing reminder of his dereliction and her anguish. A rustle in the shadows shattered the quiet. Emerging from the gloom beyond the fire's reach was a man, stooped under the burden of exhaustion. His garments stained with the dust of relentless travel. A meager pack rested on his shoulder, and weariness was etched deep into his features. Care if I poach some warmth, friend? He croaked. Silas nodded once. Welcome. He offered a strip of jerky, accepted with a grateful dip of the head. Silence descended, broken only by the ember's soft crackle and the lonely lament of a distant owl. Finally, the newcomer spoke. Heading west, eh? Tempestuous times. Always, Silas murmured. The traveler offered a dry, mirthless rasp that passed for a chuckle. True enough. But some grounds are more cursed than others. Heard tell of a town called Redemption. Seems they've developed a taste for purification. Silas's fingers tightened around his canteen. Purification? That's the talk. A proper moral frenzy. Started with a baker girl, they say. Some foolishness involving missives and a specter from the past. He scrutinized Silas, eyes glinting in the firelight. Wouldn't happen to be that ghost, would you? Silas met his gaze unflinchingly. Been called worse things. The traveler shrugged. Doesn't concern me. Just passing through. But this baker lass, rumor is she was driven out. Letters burned in the center square. Quite the spectacle. He spat into the flames. Heard they even seized her bakery. Mayor's lining his pockets, no doubt. A simmering wrath began to bubble within Silas. He knew Thompson was a viper, but to sink this low. He willed himself calm. What was contained in these letters? He inquired, his tone carefully even. The traveler shook his head. Nobody knows. Town crier read a snippet or two before they went up in smoke. Something about commitments and affections, I believe. Enough to ignite the townsfolk anyway. They branded her a temptress. A corrupting influence. Silas's jaw hardened. Lily? A temptress? The notion was ludicrous. He knew her gentle spirit, her inner fortitude, her steadfast devotion. He imagined her standing exposed in that square, ringed by scornful faces, the flames devouring her words, her aspirations, her very essence. Did they harm her? He asked, the query a suppressed growl. The traveler hesitated, shuffling his feet. I can't say for certain. Some claim she departed of her own volition. Others, they claim she was granted a choice. Flee or suffer something far worse. A wave of bile rose in Silas's throat. He envisioned Lily isolated, susceptible, compelled to abandon the only life she had ever known. Guilt pressed down on him, an unbearable weight. He should have been there. He should have shielded her. He rose abruptly, the swift action startling the traveler. My thanks, he said, voice rough-edged. For the details. The traveler watched him with caution. Where are you bound? Silas gazed westward, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. To Redemption, he stated, his voice as unyielding as granite. To settle a score. He gathered his belongings, his movements efficient and resolute. The traveler followed his progress, a spark of trepidation flickering in his gaze. Silas mounted his steed, the saddle leather protesting beneath his weight. He spurred the animal onward, leaving behind the fire and the world-weary stranger. The wind tore through his hair as he rode, carrying the mingled scents of pine and wood smoke. The vision of Lily's face seared itself into his mind, her eyes reflecting a quiet sorrow. He would locate her. He would make amends. He would exact retribution. Redemption was soon to learn that some ghosts refuse to remain interred. And some scores are paid in blood. Broken wagon, broken dreams. The wagon wheel splintered with a sound like a gunshot, sending Lily sprawling into the dust. The jolt rattled every bone in her body, a painful echo of the jarring events that had led her to this desolate stretch of road. Tears welled in her eyes, a mixture of frustration and the dull ache of betrayal. Redemption, a fading smudge on the horizon, felt like a phantom limb, a constant reminder of what she'd lost. She pushed herself up, ignoring the sting of gravel digging into her palms. The wheel was a mess, spokes snapped like twigs, the rim warped and useless. Her meager belongings, crammed into the back of the wagon, seemed to mock her with their silent weight. Flour, sugar, the few dresses she'd managed to salvage, all useless if she couldn't move them. Lily circled the broken wagon, a knot tightening in her stomach. She had a few tools, enough to fix a loose bolt or a rattling hinge, but nothing that could mend this kind of damage. The sun beat down on her, turning the air thick and heavy. She rummaged through her supplies, finding a water skin nearly empty. She took a small sip, trying to conserve it. She tried to remember her father's lessons on wagon maintenance, but his words felt distant and garbled, lost in the fog of her panic. She wrestled with the damaged wheel, trying to pry the shattered pieces apart, but they held fast, stubborn and unyielding. After an hour of fruitless effort, her hands were raw and bleeding, her clothes stained with sweat and grime. Despair threatened to overwhelm her. She sank to her knees, the broken wheel looming over her like a monument to her failure. She was alone, stranded, and utterly helpless. Was this to be her fate? To wither and die by the side of the road, another forgotten victim of redemption's judgment? The sound of approaching horses broke the silence. Lily scrambled to her feet, fear lancing through her. She hadn't seen another soul since leaving Redemption. As the riders crested the small rise in the distance, she recognized the lead figure, Mayor Thaddeus Thompson. Beside him rode two men she knew all too well, Caleb, the blacksmith's son, and Jedediah, the butcher. They were Thompson's shadows, always ready to do his bidding. Thompson reined in his horse a few feet away, his face a mask of concern that didn't quite reach his cold, calculating eyes. "Lily, my dear, what happened here?" Lily instinctively recoiled. "Just a broken wheel, Mayor Thompson." He dismounted, his boots crunching on the gravel. Caleb and Jedediah followed suit, their expressions a mixture of pity and something darker, something predatory. Thompson circled the wagon, clucking his tongue. "A sorry sight indeed. You can't possibly expect to fix this on your own, can you?" Lily crossed her arms, trying to project an air of defiance she didn't feel. "I'll manage." Thompson chuckled, a low, unpleasant sound. "Now, Lily, be reasonable. A young woman alone on the road, it's not safe. And with that wagon, you're easy prey." He gestured vaguely toward the horizon. "Why don't you let us help you back to Redemption? We can get that wheel fixed right away." Lily knew what he meant. Back to Redemption meant back to judgment, back to scorn, back to the suffocating weight of their condemnation. "No, thank you, Mayor Thompson. I appreciate the offer, but I'm quite all right." Thompson's amiable facade cracked, revealing the steel beneath. "All right? You're stranded, Lily. Alone and vulnerable. Don't be foolish. Come now, let's not make this difficult." Caleb and Jedediah moved closer, flanking her. Lily felt trapped like a rabbit caught in a snare. She remembered Silas's promise, his vow to protect her. But Silas was gone and she was on her own. "What do you want, Mayor Thompson?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He smiled, a slow, deliberate expression that sent a chill down her spine. "What I want, Lily, is for you to understand your place. And perhaps to make amends for the trouble you've caused." He stepped closer, his eyes glinting with a predatory hunger. "Redemption is a forgiving town, Lily. If you show proper remorse, perhaps we can find a way for you to earn your way back into our good graces." A gunshot in the desert. "Just sign, Lily." Thompson's voice, a sandpapery murmur that failed to mask the flint in his gaze, rasped across the baked earth. The document he offered crackled like dying leaves in the wind. "It's for the best. Redemption wants you back." Lily remained rooted, the wrecked wagon wheel a mute testament to her defiance. Dust devils danced around her scuffed boots, mirroring the war within. "Redemption wants to own me," she thought. Caleb squirmed, eyes flitting between Lily and the mayor. His Adam's apple bobbed nervously as he fought the urge to flee. Beneath the merciless sun, a glacial dread gripped his insides. "Don't be ridiculous, Lily," Thompson chuckled, the sound as devoid of mirth as a bleached skull. "We only want what's right. Your bakery and the town are suffering without you." He edged closer, casting her in shadow. "You belong in redemption." "I belong free," Lily breathed, the words snatched by the wind. Her knuckles whitened as she balled her hands into fists, denying him the sight of her fear. Thompson sighed, patience fraying. "Free? You're marooned, girl. This isn't liberation, it's lunacy." He thrust the papers forward. "Sign, and we'll escort you home, no harm done. All will be forgotten." "Forgotten?" A brittle laugh escaped her. "For what? Loving someone?" "For the disgrace," Thompson countered, his tone sharpening. "The shame you heaped on redemption." The air thrummed with unspoken threats. Caleb fidgeted, his hand instinctively drifting toward his sidearm. "Please, not here," he silently pleaded. He knew Lily's resilient spirit, but also Thompson's iron will disguised as civic duty. Thompson pressed, his voice now a sibilant whisper. "Sign them, Lily. Sign away the bakery, and those regrettable letters will be forgotten." He invaded her space, his breath a fetid wind on her face. "Refuse, and who knows what misfortunes might befall your little enterprise. Or you, for that matter." Lily's resolve flickered, but she held her ground, unyielding. She would not be cowed. "I won't." Thompson's features curdled. "You're courting disaster, Lily. A terrible mistake." He lunged, his fingers clamping onto her wrist. "Be sensible." Then a gunshot ripped the silence, a deafening blast that sent birds scattering into the azure sky. Thompson recoiled as if struck. Caleb jolted, his Colt halfway from its holster. A swirl of dust heralded the arrival of a lone figure shimmering on the horizon. Silas. He rode with a slow, deliberate grace, his dark horse a reflection of its rider's quiet power. His face was hidden beneath the brim of his hat, yet his presence radiated a potent, unwavering force. Loyalty, like tempered steel, emanated from him. Caleb felt a wave of relief tempered by a sharp unease. Silas Blackwood was a force of nature governed by his own stark code. Thompson swiftly masked his surprise, his face reverting to a rigid mask of authority. "Blackwood," he snapped, his voice strained. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" Silas offered no reply, his relentless advance the only answer. The rhythmic thud of hooves against the arid earth filled the void. Hope surged in Lily's chest. Silas had arrived. A maelstrom of emotions, gratitude, terror for him, and an overwhelming sense of joy threatened to overwhelm her. Silas halted, his mount a mere breath from Thompson, his shadow enveloping the mare. He dismounted with fluid efficiency, a silent guardian, his hand poised near his weapon. "I believe the lady made her position clear," Silas stated, his voice a low, gritty rumble that resonated with unspoken menace. No raised voice, no overt threat, just words that hung in the air, heavy with consequence. Thompson glared, his face reddening with anger. "This is a matter for redemption," he declared, his voice trembling slightly. "It's none of your concern, Blackwood." Silas's gaze flickered to Lily, a brief, potent exchange that spoke volumes. He turned back to Thompson, his expression now a blank slate. "Anything that concerns Lily Bellwether," he said, his voice devoid of inflection, "concerns me." Redemption restored. The air in the bakery crackled with suppressed accusations, the scent of fear as sharp as singed sugar. Silas, an unyielding sentinel, stood between Lily and Thompson, his gaze a steady anchor. Deputy Johnson shifted uneasily, his hand flirting with the pistol grip at his side. "Mayor Thompson," Silas rumbled, his voice a low thrum that vibrated through the room, "seems to suffer a lapse of memory. Perhaps he requires reminding that an oath, especially from one in his position, should be more durable than desert sand." Thompson emitted a harsh, mirthless sound. "Blackwood, you misinterpret my intentions. I simply wish to shield Miss Bellwether from further unpleasantness." "Unpleasantness?" Silas's mouth twisted in a sardonic smile. "Or to safeguard your own schemes, Mayor? Rumors drift like dust devils on the wind, you see. Talk of land seizures cloaked as civic improvement. Of driving honest folks to the margins to fatten your coffers." A low murmur pulsed through the small crowd gathered beyond the windows. They craned their necks, their expressions a blend of morbid curiosity and muted dread. Thompson's face bloomed a furious red. "These are baseless calumnies. I demand a retraction, Blackwood." Silas remained steadfast. "Do you, Mayor? Or shall we delve into the matter of Widow Abernathy's homestead? The one you acquired for next to nothing after persuading her that her spring had failed." Caleb Johnson's eyes widened imperceptibly. He possessed intimate knowledge of the Abernathy farm. He'd been complicit in Thompson's assessment of the well. His badge, usually a source of pride, felt like a brand of shame searing his skin. Enough! Thompson roared, his self-control unraveling. This is my domain, Blackwood, and I will not tolerate these aspersions from an outsider. Your domain, Mayor? Silas's eyebrow arched, his gaze encompassing the faces pressed against the glass. Or theirs. The domain of hard-working souls you've been systematically draining? He pivoted toward the crowd. Ask yourselves, neighbors, has Mayor Thompson truly acted as your steward? Or has he been lining his pockets at your collective expense? The silence that descended was heavy, palpable. Then, a voice, tentative as a sparrow's chirp, broke through. It was Mrs. Henderson, whose son had been denied a loan to bolster his blacksmith shop. He claimed the town couldn't afford it. Another voice followed, bolder this time. Jedediah, the carpenter, spoke. He strong-armed me into selling him lumber for half its worth. Said it was for a municipal project. The levee had shattered. One after another, voices rose in chorus, each echoing a tale of Thompson's avarice and manipulation. The air surged with collective indignation, a tangible force. Thompson stood rigid, his face ashen, his authority leaching away with each denunciation. Caleb Johnson, his features etched with remorse, stepped forward. Mayor, he said, his voice barely audible, I believe you must accompany me. Thompson offered no resistance as Caleb escorted him away, the crowd parting like the Red Sea, their silence more damning than a shouted verdict. Silas turned to Lily, his expression gentle. They'll need time to mend, but they'll endure. Lily surveyed the crowd, their faces now reflecting a mixture of contrition and compassion. She glanced at her bakery, her fingers itching to pummel dough, and infused the air with the comforting balm of baking spices. A tentative smile blossomed on her lips. I think you're right, Silas. I think I'll stay. He nodded once, a fleeting, enigmatic expression in his eyes. Good. This town needs its heart. The following dawn painted the horizon in vibrant strokes of apricot and rose. Lily stood before her bakery, the aroma of warm bread dancing in the air. She polished the windows, humming a quiet melody. A chance at renewal, she mused, still lingered. A shadow encroached. Silas stood there, traveler saddled and ready. He extended a sealed letter. I considered consigning it to the flames, he admitted, his voice rough. But I reasoned certain words warrant preservation. Lily accepted the letter, her fingers grazing his calloused hand. Thank you, Silas. He gave a curt nod, then mounted traveler. He didn't glance back as he departed, redemption dissolving into the vast, uncompromising expanse. Lily observed his departure, the unburnt letter cradled in her palm. She refrained from opening it. Not yet. She had a bakery to nurture, a town to resuscitate, and a future to bake into being. The letter could bide its time. It was a symbol, a reminder that even amidst the darkest trials, absolution remained within reach, and occasionally it arrived cloaked in shadow.